how can you get outside of the DeFi bubble? How do you go beyond just, yield farming and like trading the same tokens against each other? You should never be comfortable until you have product market fit and you're successful, right? If we don't manage to get that bridge, crypto will never gain mass adoption. They're really giving me tough ones today. I've heard that like people have been unhappy, but it's not my place to comment, right? But at the end, that's life, right? There's no point of kind of complaining about it.
Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Claudio and this is Cryptashin, and joining me today is the co-founder and CEO of Interlay and Kintsugi, Alexei. Alexei, welcome. For those that don't know who you are, if you could please introduce yourself, because this is the first time on my channel.
Hey, so thanks for having me. I'm Alexei. I'm one of the two co-founders of Interlay, as already mentioned. I'm a computer scientist by trade, got into Bitcoin research early 2015 and have been working on that topic ever since. Met my co-founder doing my PhD at Imperial College in London, where I focused on essentially bridging and how to essentially send assets across different blockchains. And we focused on Bitcoin. So how do we move BTC to other networks to unlock new use cases? And that's essentially how Interlay was born. So we then essentially span out from the university and build Interlay, and have been doing that for over 3 years now.
Sounds very good. Interesting. And so how come you chose Polkadot?
It's a good question. So there's multiple reasons. On one hand, we wanted to use Rust. So we saw Rust becoming the go-to language for blockchain development, which turned out to be a good bet. Substrate was the most advanced framework to build blockchains at that time, which was 2019. And I've been following Polkadot early on, considering I was working on, like cross-chain communication, and the Polkadot paper was one of the kind of pioneers in that space. I was always very interested in, how that thing will develop, how it will turn out in practice. And we could also very much align with the ethos of like the teams building Polkadot, like Parity Web3 Foundation, really wanting to build a decentralized system from the ground up, really being very strict on, okay, let's build it properly, decentralized. And they were also very interested in actually having a decentralized Bitcoin bridge. And if you look around, like Polkadot is the only one that actually prioritized building a decentralized solution over just, quickly just getting some custodial BTC in, which I think is very respectable and plays the long game. So in the end, kind of the interests align very much. And so we basically applied to a Web3 Foundation grant to start kind of, take it from an academic paper, which is, very far from actually a working product. And we kind of, bootstrap this way, and then at some point turn it into a full stack product.
I remember hearing about Interlay back in 2020 when I was a big supporter of Chainx, which were kind of wanting to do the same thing, but in the end, they've basically abandoned ship, right? The roadmap is not being followed, etc. And when I first heard of Interlay, because I was basically looking at competitors, like who's the Chainx competitor, and I saw like, okay, Interlay, that's interesting, but you were planning to become a common good parachain at the time, right? So you didn't actually have a plan for tokenomics, like a token model, and all of that. So I'm just curious, like, how come you decided to take this other route now and to have tokenomics in place?
So back then it was still all quite unclear how parachains will go live and how the whole setup will work. We kind of went for the common good approach because that was suggested from we were working like with the Web3 Foundation and Parity. They suggested, well, you could potentially go for that. And for me, I was always very skeptical about tokenomics and kind of like tokens in general, and kind of like often they provide less value than they do good, right? Yeah. So I was actually internally, I was actually very cautious and didn't really want to push forward with like, going for like deploying a token on the platform. But the further we tried to replicate governance in a flexible manner, like trying to do like some subcommittees, and how do we incentivize people actually to run votes? How do we bootstrap? You need then again to apply for grant funding. And it turned out to be so complex and so slow that in the end, like we realized, okay, well, actually, if this is to be a standalone system and also long-term should expand beyond just being a Polkadot component, then it needs to be independent and it needs to have its own governance, and governance needs to be flexible. And that's also when we started thinking, well, okay, but what after the bridge? Yeah. If it's a common good chain, we can't just build anything on top, right? then in the end would anyway have to go and become a parachain to build products on top of the bridge. So it kind of would be just completely conflicting. So yeah, that's why we decided to build it as a standalone product, and really allow the community to set parameters, and also hence be able to deploy new features and things that we're building now would have been very difficult to build on top of a common good parachain, as we've seen with the recent debates around like common good dexes, right? So I think in the end it was the right decision, because it allows us also to really focus on product rather than only infrastructure, which I think brings much more value to users in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I want to talk about the Canary network. So you initially launched Kintsugi, which we all heard about back then, you know, when you initially launched that. I know you got quite lucky as well, because I was following the crowd loans very closely at the time, and there were supposed to be only 5 per round, but then Parity have decided to open up a 6th. So you actually won on that 6th one. I remember that because I took part in it myself. I know that a lot of people have been supporting me as well with a referral link as well and contributing through that. So of course that's been great. But how has development been going for that? Like, how did you find like utility so far? Like, are many people using the bridge at the moment, or how are you finding it?
So maybe just back to the crowd on itself. So it wasn't Parity who decided it, just to
Wasn't
correct,
it?
because it was so basically Kusama governance and the council voted to open new slots. And in the end, it was because, you know, there was a lot of pressure on teams early on, you know, oh, there will be only 10 slots. And then, you know, after the first 2 auctions, there were another 48. So basically they realized, okay, like there's no point in creating more conflict, and they just anyway could open up more slots because there's no space. So yeah, otherwise we would have to wait for another month and just restart the whole process, which would have been such a waste of resources. But yeah, no, I mean, we went live. So the bridge deployed on Kintsugi over a year ago by now, and has been working since. So we had BDC bridged, and people were trying things out on, like, we've pushed into a few like integrations on the Kusama network. So Moonriver and Karura, and also then Parallel. I mean, overall, like DeFi and Kusama is definitely not very big. So that's what we've seen. But there's still usage. People are trying with experimenting with a bridge. That's where also like we try to deploy new features, and you know, you see kind of volumes happening, but they're not like they're not growing very aggressively. So it's slow organic growth, which is healthy, but obviously we need to get more use cases. I mean, in the end, what we need is more things to do with Bitcoin in the ecosystem. And this is also why we've then decided to build our own DeFi layer. We've done around $12 million in BTC volume so far over like both Interlay and Kintsugi over the past few months, which is okay. It's okay. It's not like billions, but given the market conditions and overall kind of slightly dormant state of the DeFi ecosystem right now, I think it's all right. And we hope to kind of, you know, act as a defibrillator with the new DeFi Hub launch now. So what we've been doing, but I guess that's your next question, so I'll pause here.
Yeah, no, I actually wanted to ask you about the volume. So sorry, did you say 12 million in Bitcoin being transferred over, right? Over to Kintsugi?
Dollars, so dollars worth of BTC.
No, $12 million
kind of
worth of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
On the bridge. Okay, cool. So now I want to ask you about the Interlay. So what's the volume like over there? And then after that, I'd like to know more about your plans for Kintsugi. If you could talk about that, like, do you still see value in having the Canary network, or will you be concentrating most of your efforts towards Interlay?
So the 12 million is both Kintsugi and Interlay. So Kintsugi slowed down at some point when Interlay network launched, because then they were basically at the same level. Yeah. And now with the DeFi Hub launching on Kintsugi first, you'll see volumes increase on Kintsugi, and then they'll slowly go down as the volumes increase on Interlay when the DeFi Hub launches on Interlay. So that's kind of the cycle, right? So things go to Kintsugi, it goes up, volume activity goes up, and then it slows down as people move over to Interlay with like bigger volumes and so on. And as we grow and become like the iterations become faster, you see like new features ship much quicker to Kintsugi, Interlay, and you'll kind of see a cycle. In terms of having a canary network, whether we regret it or not, overall it's still a net positive, because all of the tricky issues, all the bugs, any issues that we had so far were always caught by Kintsugi, right? We do rigorous testing. We've just completed our 6th protocol audits. Yeah. We have a bug bounty that's been running for a long time with high prizes, and we've had white hats also disclose things, but all on Kintsugi basically, right? And so far, right, this has really served us very well because we were anything that we cannot catch through audits, through testing on zero value testnets internally with public testnets. In the end, that's like it has been caught on Kintsugi where you have real money. So that's where people behave differently, and that's where you actually see adversarial behavior. That's where things tend to break.
Yeah.
So in the end, overall good. It does, of course, it doesn't mean we have to maintain two networks, and we have to always make a decision of, okay, we want to launch quicker on Interlay, like with the DeFi as is right now, right? So we want to launch the DeFi on Interlay. It first has to go to Kintsugi. We want to, build up traction, get people to use it, but we also need to be careful to not, get everybody on Kintsugi, and then it's very hard to move people over to Interlay, which is actually the main thing where you have much more liquidity and we can get institutions also involved. So that's always kind of, it is definitely something we always need to pay attention, but there's always a cost, right? We have, on the other hand, we can ship much quicker. On Kintsugi, we do continuous releases. On Interlay, we release like one big release, one big update, new feature, right? New user interface. On Kintsugi, we do continuous releases. So you'll see over the next few weeks, and as you've seen already, we release the lending protocol, then the AMM UI, and so on, like step by. So that was on testnet, but you'll see the same thing on Kintsugi, like UI improvements and feature improvements. It'll be continuous up until the point where we say, okay, now it's a good time to take everything and launch on Interlay as a like full stack thing. So it allows us to keep developing while the core features have launched and keep improving without being too concerned about, oh, what if it's not perfect.
Yeah.
So the idea is to really have a perfect product on Interlay. And in Kintsugi, we can be a bit more flexible. The UI doesn't have to look brilliant. So it has to work. On Interlay, it also has to look good. The look and feel has to work. We want the on-off ramps. All the integrations have to be top-notch. So overall, I still think it's useful and definitely I net positive.
Okay, sounds good. That sounds good to me then. Now I do want to know about the two coins that you've got, right? We've got KINT and then we've got INTR. Is there a plan to eventually have INTR across Kintsugi and Interlay and to possibly do some kind of a snapshot and maybe airdrop those people a certain share of that INTR, if it's even possible, from the treasury or from somewhere? Is there a plan for that? Do you think that could be feasible for you rather than having the two coins and running the networks on two different coins instead of just using the one? Also considering that there will be a bridge very soon, as you know, called Bridge Hub, which is going to connect Kusama to Polkadot and vice versa.
I mean, I'm not sure how utilized that bridge will be, right? Because most communities have two networks on Kusama and Polkadot, and often there's a reason why you have these versions, right? It's very few projects have different kind of products on Kusama and on Polkadot, and most will probably have, in the end, it's going to converge to having like the main core base on Polkadot, and in the end, you'll have similar things on Kusama. So whether that bridge will be highly utilized, I don't know. We'll see. I think it's more of, okay, it has to happen. It's like, it's a good way to showcase substrate to substrate bridges, and then other substrate ecosystems. If you have bigger standalone projects come in, like already established big projects migrate to substrate, then they know, okay, it works, it's been showcased. I think for my 2 cents, I think that's the biggest value add. So to show that hey, it's possible here, it works in production, and it's an invitation then to bigger projects to go to Polkadot and on substrate rather than to Cosmos. So Kintsugi, Interlay, I mean, they're independent communities, right? So independent code bases. The community is the same. We've considered long-term to have basically joined. So basically to have like governance cross-involved. So the Kintsugi community can also vote on Interlay and vice versa, but this will require the bridge and a few other, it require like cross-chain governance messages. Let's put it this way. This is a problem that is addressed much later, right? First, you need to really make sure that there's users liquidity, that it's product market fit, and then you can start thinking, okay, how do we reconnect the governance of these two systems closer? How do we align interests? Because so far it's still the same community, right? This becomes relevant when they start diverging, as you've seen on Kusama and Polkadot. But I think we're still far away from that. So it's still early, right? It's still still everything's like new. So I think for now, it's basically, it's anyway the same community, right? It's most people are involved in both projects, and until we see I don't know, maybe the Kintsugi community wants to build a Dogecoin bridge, right? And the Interlay community says, well, fine, but we don't want that on Interlay because we want to focus on Bitcoin. At that point, you might see then, the difference, and that's fine, and that's good if it happens. But yeah, so I think, but that's all I can say to that.
Okay, sounds good. Now I need to switch a little bit and ask you one of the tougher questions in relation to your partnership with Acala. Like, we know that there was an unfortunate incident that happened, with the minting bug with the USD, and I know that it had somewhat impacted one of the pairs with IBTC as well, right? Which is related to the pegging of Bitcoin on Interlay. So, I mean, what's going to be your plan going forward in terms of this partnership with Acala, and I don't know, future integrations? I mean, do you still collaborate with the team? Are you still working together in some way, or do you feel let down by the event? And like, what's your plan with that?
No, of course we collaborate with Acala. I think they're still a strong team. I also think it's a bit unfair to kind of say, oh, we've been let down. I mean, we're all building bleeding edge technology, right? Bugs happen. Whether and I don't want to comment on I'm not involved in like the Acala community as much. So I've heard that like people have been unhappy, but it's not my place to comment, right? Because in the end, we have to make sure that we make our community happy. And I wouldn't like to be in their shoes, right? It's a big thing to fix. And we're still actively working with them. And I still think they're a very valuable asset to the ecosystem. I mean, if you think how much Acala has built and contributed to the open source code bases, how much tooling they've contributed. I know we often forget the good things when something bad happens, but I think you have to look at the long-term horizon. I think Acala as a whole will recover. I hope they will, because we need strong players and people who are committed to the ecosystem to remain active and really do their best. In our situation, of course, like, it was an unfortunate timing. It was right before the Interlay launch, and we had basically the Nomad hack on Moonbeam and the incident on Acala, which basically that were our two main integration partners. So it was quite unfortunate for our launch. But at the end, that's life, right? There's no point of kind of complaining about it. That's why we made the decision. Okay, we'll build our own DeFi layer, so we can build our own user base, and our users can basically, build trust in Interlay product. And then we'll keep integrating with everybody, however. So our mission is still bring Bitcoin to the Polkadot ecosystem, but we will build the deep liquidity directly in our DeFi layer, because it's just much easier for us, and it's also much more interesting for users and our community, because there's much more value add, right? There's much more value accrual within Interlay, and it's also a much better position then, right? For us then when we integrate with partners, because then we actually, there's a lot of BTC there, and you can actually say, okay, look here, you can actually tap into liquidity versus, okay, there's not much liquidity and us struggling kind of to get more liquidity onto their platform. So
absolutely.
Overall, I think it's, so in summary, I think I'm sure they will recover. It was unfortunate that it happened. And of course it affected the entire ecosystem. I also had like CoinDesk, especially like, how media is, right? They were like, oh, there's IBTC was also like trying to, see who else was hacked. And so CoinDesk like asking us, oh, was IBTC hacked as well? Like, no, it wasn't. Everything's working. It's one of the assets in the pools. So yeah, overall, I think we're way past that incident, and now just working to reactivate the entire Polkadot community and make sure that we start growing more actively as a community.
Yeah, and we can only hope that things are going to be okay, going forward, because the market conditions also don't help. So it's a mix of bad market conditions and the incident, and it's like, it's hopefully things are going to change. We'll see how it progresses, because there is a lot of building going on, and that's probably the most important thing at the end of the day. I mean, if we look at GitHub activity across the board from all the parachain teams, there's a lot of delivery there, and also from Parity themselves, right, and also on Kusama. So there's a lot of stuff we'll be looking forward to. What's your take on asynchronous backing? Are you looking forward to that to speed up block time for Kintsugi very soon, and then later on Interlay?
I mean, I think it's super useful. It's super exciting that Parity continues to ship technology and continuously improve the protocol and make it speed it up and basically make it even more competitive with other things that are happening on the L2 space. Personally speaking, and this is my honest opinion, I don't think that's like, because you mentioned also GitHub activity and so on. I don't think that's what's going to move the needle, though, right? Like, you have I know like there's a lot of like code, like there's a lot of stats like, oh, where there's so many commits per team and it's building is going on. I mean, that's the expectation, right? I mean, what else should we be doing? Like we have to be building. But what I think we need is more like product. We need product activity. We need business development activity. You need, that's why we, for example, Interlay took leads. Initially, we took lead on the Fireblocks custody deal. We tried to put together an ecosystem-wide integration deal with Fireblocks and other custodians. And then basically, it takes a lot of time to coordinate. And the idea is, look, we as individual teams are too small, and there's like, there's so many custodians, like Fireblocks is one of them, and there's tons of others that we need to talk to, right? We need to get institutional custody because many companies, institutions, they can't, build multi-sigs. Their internal policies don't allow that. Yeah. So we try to kind of, rally the entire community, and then basically this is still happening, but it's very slow with big institutions. Yeah. So, but what we've done on the other hand, kind of once that got started, and then Parity is also kind of helping a lot, trying to do a lot of business efforts in these directions. So there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. The goal is to make this more transparent to the community, obviously. Yeah. So we're also working on ways to share more and make, like, it's often very hard to share like all the details because it's still businesses and institutions and they have some secrecy policies. Yeah. But another one that we've been working on is like on-ramps. So we've put together an ecosystem-wide deal and negotiated with 10 different on-ramp providers and ended up coming to agreement with Banksa. So Banksa is ready to integrate parachains and provide direct access to parachain assets, and also KSM, DOT, and USDT and other stablecoins directly to parachains. So you don't have to figure out how to go from exchange, over like the statement or whatever, or relay chain to the native actually parachain, but you can go there directly. At least, I mean, there's fees involved, obviously, but at least for small amounts, if you want to quickly test or pay for fees, it's very simple. And the discussion post actually went live to Kusama, and we hope to push the next one to Polkadot as well. So I think these things, where you actually improve the user on-ramp and the acquisition and make it very easy for people to go to Polkadot and to parachains, I think that's what we need. So and you'll see much more business development efforts. Sorry,
no, I was going to ask you regarding the off-ramps, will this off-ramp be on the Interlay application, or will it be like within the Polkadot wallets, which will allow users to buy ultimately like KINT or INTR or other parachain coins?
Both. So it's already, Talisman is already integrated with Banksa. So any asset that's listed with Banksa will be available in Talisman. And also the idea is that each parachain can have a button. So you say, go fund the wallet, and then they can choose whether to integrate directly or they forward to Banksa. But the goal is it's much easier. The user doesn't have to figure out which exchanges, this thing is listed on, create a new account, but you can literally, for smaller amounts, it's very easy to, get this process done.
What about the liquidity?
So Banksa handles all the complexity in the background.
What about the liquidity? Where are they actually buying this from or selling it from? Like who has the coins?
So they basically act between the exchanges and the user. So instead of the user trying to find the exchange and then do the multiple steps of withdraw to relay chain, move through XCM to parachain, Banksa does this. So you just interface with Banksa and you get it on the parachain accounts. And you can use USDT, KSM native token directly on, let's say, Kintsugi or Interlay parachain. And in the background, they source from an exchange, they move through XCM, but they do everything for you, and they manage like liquidity across these kind of multiple steps, which is a massive user experience improvement, right? So you don't need to worry about, what is the path and which fees do I need to pay and so on. So there's one fee. It's, of course, they charge you for the service. But I think most people are happy to pay that little bit extra to not spend an hour to get assets onto a chain, but it's a few minutes now.
Absolutely.
Which is
absolutely.
A massive improvement.
Massive, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think this is going to be huge because ultimately you need a product that makes it easy that gives a simple user experience at the end of the day. That's all you need, right? Yeah. And this is what we're offering now, slowly and surely, especially Nova. Like I'm really impressed with Nova. I don't work for Nova. I'm not being paid by them, but I'm ultimately really impressed with the actual wallet because I am using it and it's just amazing. You're on the mobile, you can vote in governance, you can access all the different applications, all the L2s that exist on top of all these parachains. It's just amazing what they've done. It's a shame that many people still don't know about them. Obviously, people within the ecosystem do, but I'm talking about those outside who badmouth Polkadot.js they don't know that about these alternatives, which make life so much easier. So now I do need to ask you about talking about XCM and bridging and all that. Do you have any plans to open up HRMP channels with other parachains?
I mean, sure. I mean, we keep opening them up, but for us, it's always a case of prioritization. So we need to be razor focused on product. So what we don't typically do is just open a channel because it's possible if there's no use case. If there's no use case, like it takes time. You need to test it, you need to maintain it. So for us, it's more like, okay, we're razor focused. We want to get Bitcoin into DeFi. We want to unlock new use cases. What can we do? So like, for example, Hydra DX, they launched and we instantly, pushed to open a channel with them and make sure that we can actually get IBTC onto Hydra, which is one of the very interesting projects right now. So that's kind of our approach. So we stay in touch with the ecosystem and we're always excited to see, okay, where can we integrate? But I think there's also a risk of, so the number of XCM channels is not a success metric on our side, right? It's like, I don't consider us being successful if we have 20 XCM channels. I consider us if we have multiple thousands of users, then yes. And if an opening an XCM channel brings new users and we can basically get more activity, then yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole point of being a Polkadot parachain, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, we don't want to be connected to every single parachain either if it's not going to bring you any utility, right, at the end of the day. So
I mean, you can, but also now with like statement and maybe or asset hub, probably, as we might start calling it, right? If that is the place to source assets, then and then you have a bridge hub where you can source external assets, then you don't need to connect to all parachains, but you can actually use these hubs to basically, for like, if it's just transfers, you can use these hubs potentially for these interactions. And it also simplifies things because then a new project doesn't have to open like 50 channels, but can go to asset hub to get access to all the other assets of Polkadot, which is also a massive improvement. It makes, because we've been around for a while, we just open channels and as we go, but a new team launches, they're like, okay, well, there's so many things, like which channel do I open first? And it takes time, and then they obviously need to get the other team to be active. So I think, having like an asset hub, like statement right now, but I would prefer to call them something like asset hub. I think that's very useful. So I think, that's going to probably make the lives of these projects much easier.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. No, it's a really good plan. Now, I need to ask you something which is not usually an easy question, but I have to ask everyone this question. So you're not getting away from this either. With regards to runway, financial sustainability of Interlay and Kintsugi, without having to let any staff go, how long do you think you can sustain the team for right now? Like, well, what's your time frame? I don't need to know amount, so just time frame ultimately.
I think we're one of the teams with comfortable runways, so we can comfortably continue building. Comfortably. You should never be comfortable until you have product market fit and you're successful, right?
Yeah.
But no, we don't have any issues in that regard. So we are well set up. We've always been very cautious with spending. We never did really any like champagne parties or like, like doing massive sponsorships of like, I don't know, some weird videos or anything. No, so we're very focused on building. We have a very strong team, very razor focused. So we never really, I know like we never really had this camp explosion where we hired like triple the team and then let everybody go. We don't really do that. So our ethos is more like really think before we hire new roles. Do we need them? And can we basically sustain? Can we also give job safety, right? Because in the end, I know like there's different ways to run a company. We prefer to, give job safety to our team and make sure like, okay, we can deliver and we don't hire someone that will have to like go in a month. Like that's completely pointless. So,
I totally agree.
So that's all I can say, right? So we are definitely, so we're not going anywhere. We're still building. We're actually super excited about the products we're about to launch. And now it's really time for us to really start pushing towards products. Like the tech is there, really heads down, focused over the last few months to really ship this DeFi layer, as you've seen in our latest white paper. And we've been also working hard on the business side, talking to LPs, talking to staking providers and infrastructure operators, on-ramp providers, and other institutional players that we just need in the ecosystem. Banks is the first, and there'll be more to come over the next months.
Okay, sounds interesting. So would you say for the next 2 years you're covered and worry-free?
I mean, are you ever worry free? I mean, you could always have more runway, right? You can always have more cash, and of course, it's always easier to hire 50 more people to get the stuff done. But yes, we're set up in a position to deliver what we want to deliver.
So I know you were talking about products earlier. We need products. We don't just need development activity. And if we have a cool product, then people will come. But what is your plan? Like once you have this product launched, to market Interlay and Kintsugi to the wider audience, maybe outside of the Polkadot ecosystem? I know we're doing this interview. It is free, by the way. It was a poll voted by the community, but this is just like, I'm mostly a Polkadot focused channel. So what is your plan to maybe go outside, not necessarily to other YouTubers, but just to advertise and to market Interlay?
So I mean, as you know, Interlay as a brand, we've always shied away of shilling and being very aggressive, like promising like crazy API, promising revenues. Like we don't do that. Like like some people may disagree, but I think reputation and actually sticking to your plan and delivering is what counts more in the long run. I mean, what's the point if we were like, if you look back and teams like some competitors promised a lot, and also in Ethereum were promising decentralization, or in Solana, right? Rapid conversions were saying, oh, we're so decentral, we're so good, and where are they now, right? FTX imploded, they went down as well. So I think like it's always kind of best to stay true to what you're actually doing. But of course, I mean, our goal is to spread the word and expand the user base. I mean, we are a Bitcoin focused company, right? And a Bitcoin focused product. So, I mean, I was at Advancing Bitcoin in London last week, which is a more dev-focused conference, but it's always very important to catch up and stay in touch with what all the development activity happening on Bitcoin. And I wouldn't underestimate, actually, a lot of stuff is being now built. A lot of things where there's many synergies also with like applications being developed on top of BTC. And honestly, what I think is really relevant is not just marketing to DeFi communities. So DeFi communities, DeFi users on other chains, they will come if there is a good product and they can actually make revenues, and they can actually or if you have incentives, right, and they can yield farm, and if there's a easy and good way for them to on-ramp. So we're focusing on on-ramp, we're focusing on product. But I think the biggest impact, and this is what we're actually focusing more, is like, how can you get outside of the DeFi bubble? How do you go beyond just yield farming and like trading the same tokens against each other? How do you connect Bitcoin and all the real world use cases you have? I mean, if you look at what Bitcoin is actually used for, it's payments in some countries where you don't have good access to the financial system, and as a store of value, and people borrow against it. And this is exactly what we're trying to do. So we're trying to go out to these communities, to these conferences, and to these channels, and that's what I've been doing in the background for the last few months, is talk to people at funds who run other Bitcoin companies who are really working on the forefronts of adoption, and try to understand what are their problems, what are their needs, how can we get that, what can we do at Interlay as a product to improve their lives and improve their work, like make their work much easier, and basically get them, commit them to testing. So it's more of a grassroots approach, but it's high. I think it's a very high return on investment, because these are people who then make decisions at bigger companies, and these are people who will actually use the product. These are people who are interested in maybe borrowing against BTC and then using it in real world commerce. And I think honestly, my 2 cents is that's where we're heading. So really this intersection between real world commerce and finance and crypto. If we don't manage to get that bridge, crypto will never gain mass adoption. And then I see Interlay as a network and as a product, specifically because it's Bitcoin oriented, really kind of filling this gap. And obviously the marketing efforts will go hand in hand with this. So it's more educating people, showing that you can use the product, partnering with bigger companies that offer Bitcoin products, and trying to tap into their user base.
No, I totally agree with you. And you're right. I mean, real world assets to DeFi is also one of the things that's moving right now. And we've seen Centrifuge perform quite well from that aspect. So let's see how things go. What is one thing in life that you truly desire?
They're really giving me tough ones today. So let me put it this way. So I mean, actually, when I wake up every morning, and like you need to have a reason to wake up, right? So you need to kind of motivate yourself to do the hard work, and do all these annoying things, and like also go through tough periods. And for me, it's really contributing to this vision of Bitcoin, and actually contributing towards avoiding things like FTX, avoiding things like Celsius, 3AC, avoiding things like banks being corrupt, really trying to leave, as small as it may be, but trying to really contribute to, and this may sound very kind of, very idealistic, but in the end, I would not be able to get up if I was just doing this for money. Like, I would not be able to motivate myself. So for me, the biggest motivation is, okay, actually being able to even if it is small, have a positive impact on what Bitcoin and like this area of like cryptocurrency is actually having on the world, and do our parts and really try to improve the system and allow, like, I live in Austria and I'm lucky enough to have access to a financial system, but many people don't. And I know enough people in many countries who are affected either by war or by natural catastrophes or by corrupt governance who don't have that. And that's why we did Interlay. That's why you focus on decentralization. That's why you probably will put us into a decentralization maxi camp, where we really live decentralization and we don't want to go the centralized way until if it's not necessary. So I think the desire in life is really, okay, do something meaningful and contribute.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the words.
And obviously and have fun while doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, don't just live a normal life and go to this 9-to-5 job, even as a co-founder or CEO. Like, basically step up your game and provide some value to the world, right?
I mean, there's nothing about 9-to-5 jobs. I mean, you can still have very good impact and positive impact if you're doing 9-to-5. I don't think it's about the hours. I think it's about conviction in what you believe in and what you spend your time on.
Exactly.
So what I don't believe in, for example, where I don't want Interlay to go is to become a project that is just used for yield farming and where people just go speculate and so on, because this isn't sustainable, right? You see this in other projects which go up and then they disappear. And I think where I see Interlay going is, I mean, yes, you will of course have that as well. You will have speculation. That's all necessary. It's a part of the cycle, right? You need early adopters who are open to risk and experimentation. They of course need to have a return on the risk, right? Absolutely. But after that, there needs to be an after. There needs to be a time where you actually get outside of this, DeFi bubble, and you go to real users in the real world, and you actually have a product that makes them happy and that they want to use.
Perfect.
And you're doing that and building a product that people really want, and they tell you that they like your product and they use it. I think that's the highest level of gratification.
Absolutely. Alexei, thank you very much for joining. It was really great, and I really enjoyed the session myself. So if you want to check out this interview, by the way, it is in different timestamps. It's probably too late to say that, but just in case, right? And you can follow Interlay on their official website, also on Twitter. Both links will be found in the description of this video and also in the pinned comment. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.